To Kegel or not to Kegel, that is the question, or at least it should be. Good morning, Facebook and Instagram. How are you doing this Monday morning? My throat's a little bit raspy. I'm still not 100% sure what's going on there, but I'm feeling better. But it seems to be a couple of weeks now that we've been dealing with stuff. Anyways, just a little bit of a standard disclaimer before we start. The content in this video is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be a substitute for any medical or mental health advice from your healthcare providers. So now that that is out of the way, today is all about Kegels. When it comes to Kegels, oftentimes when it comes to pelvic health, there is this thought that the only thing that can really be done in terms of pelvic health is doing a Kegel. And this is false in many ways. So Kegels are not always going to be the answer, especially when we're talking about incontinence specifically. So there's a variety of reasons that Kegels could be used, but we're going to talk about it more or less from an incontinence standpoint today. And that goes for even when they are done correctly. So how do you know if Kegels are for you? Well, the first and foremost way to know is that you should go see a pelvic floor physiotherapist. So what they will do is, as long as you're okay with it, they will do an internal exam, and they will be able to tell from this internal exam exactly what is happening in your pelvic floor. So regardless of the type of dysfunction that you are having, you're going to get a much more established map than any other way when it comes to the pelvic floor. So I definitely recommend an internal exam. When it comes to urinary incontinence specifically, pelvic floor physiotherapy is 80% effective in treating urinary incontinence, and there are 4 different types of urinary specific incontinence. So there's a few things that could come up in the pelvic floor where Kegels are probably not going to be the answer. So, and this will also be identified within that same exam. So trigger points may come up. I've had a few clients who have been dealing with various types of pelvic floor dysfunction, and it took releasing trigger points within the pelvic floor. That is something that A, is not within my scope of practice, and B, it's not something that we can easily do on ourselves. It's the same thing like a massage, right? We have certain trigger points in the body, and even though your partner, or maybe if you've got a really good friend who's willing to give you a massage, they can't release those trigger points in the same way as a registered massage therapist. Does that make sense? There can also be restricting from scarring. So whether that is scarring within the pelvic floor tissues itself, which could be from childbirth, any tearing that happened, whether there's scarring from any surgery, C-section, all types of scarring within that general area can be affecting the pelvic floor in a way where a Kegel will not help because it's restriction. It's already got this essence of tightness in it. And then there are some other things that maybe you might be even able to identify. In fact, you would definitely be able to identify, and that is pain. Pain within the pelvic floor of any type. Typically, I'll say typically, does not require Kegels. So a pelvic floor physiotherapist will help guide you through some exercises during this internal exam to make sure that you are properly engaging in your Kegels. Some things that, so for instance, when I say properly, about 30 to 50% of women are doing Kegels wrong. So there's a few different things that I've heard people talk about in the past. One of them, and some of them I can relate to before I had any of my training, is some people are just kind of squeezing their bum. And other people are more aware of kind of the vaginal area of the pelvic floor, and they are kind of squeezing in front, but not around the back of the pelvic floor. So there's 3 layers of pelvic floor muscles, which involve nerves and all kinds of stuff within there. So I'm talking about front to back, basically. And then they're doing the squeezing part, but they are not doing the lifting part. So one of the visualizations I use in classes when it comes to doing the pelvic floor is a nice visual of how it actually functions. Is there is a release on the downward. So if you visualize a jellyfish, when the jellyfish is moving down, it kind of flattens out. And when it's rising back up towards the surface, it kind of squeezes into itself and it lifts at the same time. So this is one of the visualizations that we use in classes itself in terms of engaging and releasing the pelvic floor. The other thing that works for quite a few people is the visualization of blueberries. So a blueberry at your vaginal opening and your anal opening, and then lifting them up with your vagina and your anus without squashing them. So very lightly picking up blueberries. The other one is sipping a very thick milkshake through a straw. So you can even take a moment and try these out if you would like, just to make sure that you're engaging properly. But again, I emphasize that Kegels are not necessarily what you need when it comes to pelvic floor dysfunction. Another thing that is typically done when we're doing Kegels is people say, do Kegels when you're stuck in traffic, or they're laying down, or they're in a stationary position. But ideally, we want to incorporate Kegels into movement as well. It's not going to do you a whole lot of good if you learn how to do them kind of in a rushed way. You're in a hurry to get them done because you're like, oh yeah, I forgot to do my Kegels. And they're done with bad posture as well, which is kind of, we talk about this a lot in the morning show, how the diaphragm and pelvic floor are both breathing muscles, 2 out of 3 breathing muscles, and when they're stacked directly on top of each other, I'm using my hands, but you can't even see, when they're stacked directly on top of each other, they mirror each other's movement. So you're doing yourself a disservice when you're in bad posture performing Kegels. So the best way to train your pelvic floor, Kegels aside, is to incorporate pelvic floor specific exercises into your training. So that involves both contracting and relaxing. And this is how I start all of my training programs, because it is important to start bringing those aspects into your training period. Especially as women, we are more susceptible to pelvic floor dysfunction than men, not because of childbirth or anything, and it definitely is a trigger for a lot of pelvic floor dysfunction. It was definitely for me, but women have an extra opening than men do, and intra-abdominal pressure within the belly when we're performing heavy lifting, especially things like that, coughing, sneezing, jumping, laughing, all those things. The pressure within your body is trying to escape, so typically goes downward, tries to escape through the pelvic floor, and that's where a lot of weakness is created. So this is just, again, one of the other aspects. So again, are Kegels right for you? Depends. Isn't that the most annoying answer ever? It depends. It totally depends. But again, that pelvic floor physio appointment will be the most important appointment you have in terms of getting in touch with what is happening with your pelvic health and whether Kegels are needed. So thank you so much for tuning in this morning. I always appreciate it. And if you have any questions, comments, definitely slide them into my DMs. Let me know. I am always more than willing to help. And keep in mind that you can definitely set up appointments with me online over Skype typically. And you get a recording of it, which is a bonus. But yeah, that's all I've got for you this morning. So to Kegel or not to Kegel? It really is the Kegel. It really is a Kegel. Oh my goodness. It really is the question. So yeah, go find out. Seriously. Women, pelvic floor physiotherapists, I cannot express it enough. This is such an important step to managing your pelvic health. And then, if you want that training aspect, hello, here I am. So again, thanks so much for tuning in. I always drag on the end, don't I? I'm going to try to get better at that. Anyways, thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you have an amazing Monday, an amazing day. And I'm going to start popping on here live throughout the week as things come up, because sometimes I'm getting these ideas and by the time Monday comes around, they're like gone. And sometimes they're just little tiny like snippets. So yeah, I'll definitely be seeing you at some point this week. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I will see you soon. All right, bye.